What is going on, Hot Take Hockey? Yes, I have a smile on my face because to open it up, let's talk about being a fan of the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Leafs have signed Auston Matthews to an extension of 5 years, an $11.634 AAV contract. I'm going to break it down, positives, negatives, how this just puts it forward as the Leafs being a long-term Stanley Cup contender, and how this is just exciting for the fan base in the city of Toronto. So let's go over it. I think there's a lot to talk about here. I'm going to try to make it a very short video, and yeah, let's break it down. So positives. You got 2 stars now. You got Tavares, you got Matthews up the middle for the next 6 playoff runs, including this year. Matthews now 5. Tavares has got 6 after this year. So that's huge. You're working with a Pittsburgh, Chicago method. They have cups to show for there. 2 stars. You could argue the Leafs have 3 with Marner as well, hopefully long term. And then, obviously, you're avoiding the offer sheet in the offseason. Doing it now avoids the July 1st and on. An offer sheet from whether it's Arizona or another team, you avoid that. I want to be really positive about this. I think regardless, and I have this on my list right here of positives, Auston Matthews is a positive. Auston Matthews here is a positive. He's a point-per-game player. He's a guy that will run your power play 5-on-5. He was one of the most ridiculous 5-on-5 players in the last 2 years. His possession numbers are up there. He can play in the defensive end. He's the 200-foot player you want on your team, the number 1 center you want on your team. And he looked at Tavares and obviously garnered a little more. Now, as a fan, I'm really happy to see Auston Matthews with the Leafs for long term, and everyone should be. 5 years, as much as it's not 6, 7, or 8, it's not as long as it could have been, and it's not a McDavid long, but 5 years is pretty long. 6 playoff runs is pretty good. Let's go on to the negatives. Again, as a fan, I'm really happy. There's negatives to this deal. All right, so this obviously benefits Matthews a lot more. Before we get into the negatives, let's look at the cap, how it breaks down. So from Bob McKenzie, you see year 1, year 2, 15.2, and then $700K salary. So this is heavily based on signing bonuses, which is crazy. $54.5 million in total on signing bonuses, $3.65 million in salary. Obviously, that doesn't change the cap hit. The cap hit will still be that 11.634. Obviously, the signing bonuses go down as the years go by. But yeah, the cap, that won't affect the cap. The cap is at 11.634 starting next year. So for me, it's obviously a crazy amount of money. Auston Matthews, who's a very young player in today's NHL, is now very rich, and his contract will expire when he is 27 years of age. Does that sound familiar? Yes. John Tavares left the New York Islanders, signed with the Leafs now at the age of 27. So, negatives. It's a short term with a higher anticipated cap. The report just came out shortly after him signing that McKenzie, Friedman, they were kind of all on the same page that it would have been higher than the $12.5 million of McDavid had it been 7 or 8 years. Potentially even in the 13s, which is absolutely insane. We talked about it. San Jose in the offseason was offering Tavares close to 13. Matthews was demanding 13, in around 13 for the 7 or 8 year range. 6 years wasn't enough to get it down to 11.6 apparently. 5 years is where it stands. That's one negative. Another negative is risk of leaving sooner. So we can talk about it. Maybe going to his home place with Arizona, potentially other markets in the U.S. I mean, we're looking at a Florida tax-free environment with Kucherov, who's probably going to make at least the same or more money than Matthews in its entirety. And a guy like Marner, who might sign a comparable contract to that, he'll still make a lot more because of tax. Another negative is they signed in season versus the previous offseason. So a lot of people are talking about this. Had they re-signed, signing Matthews and Marner to extensions this past offseason, the price would have been a lot lower. Prices have kind of been set, and especially now with the Matthews contract, Dubas and Chiarelli have kind of set it for the big stars up and coming. So now it's obviously a huge difference for what's to come with contracts and young superstars in the NHL. Another one is now what happens with Marner to follow. Now Marner's sitting in his room getting all excited he's definitely going to garner 10 plus million. I can't see them keeping it under 10, especially with all the whole situation. Like I said, tax. There's the regards of Marner getting more production than Matthews and Tavares. There's a lot to kind of contribute to why I believe that, and I think it's definite that he'll get over 10. I think his camp's going to start at over 11, to be honest. And Bob McKenzie did bring up a good point because I think it's 4 and 5 that will make him a UFA on a shorter term deal. He'll either sign 3, I could be wrong, it could be 4 maybe, to keep him on RFA status, or it'll be 6, 7, and 8, which would keep him longer term and hopefully be less than 11. I can't imagine it being more than a 10.5. But then again, I didn't think a Matthews contract at 5 years would be over like 11.25. So a little surprised by that. So to break it down, with the 2 players now, Leafs are now the club with the highest combined AAV allocated to their top 2 centers starting next season. Matthews Tavares at 22.634, McDavid Draisaitl at 21, then Crosby Malkin, Kopitar Carter, Getzlaf Kessler. That says something as well, right? So the Leafs obviously are following the plan, like I said, of a Chicago-Pittsburgh, but with the cap rising, obviously this amount of money comes at a much higher price. So Matthews, guys, again, it's huge. To end with a positive note, you kind of heard my negatives. My first reaction on the signing, I'll be honest, wasn't this huge happy thing. For a second, I was a fan. I was yes, but then after that, I was kind of thinking of all the negatives and how this obviously is impacting Matthews positively, way more than it's impacting the Leafs positively. It's a negative impact for the Leafs in terms of their cap crunch, but a positive impact in terms of Marner's the only star left to lock up long term. I would consider 5 years pretty long term. We're looking at other contracts that, I mean, Marleau, it seems like Marleau's been part of the Leafs for a while, and this is only his second year, in my opinion. So, again, it's a huge step for the Leafs. Ending in a positive note, the Leafs are going to be a Stanley Cup contender for years to come. Auston Matthews, again, signs the 5-year extension with the Leafs, 11.634. Kyle Dubas gets it done, and I think most Leafs fans are happy. I think there's some that are obviously disappointed with the number on both term and dollar amount. But we'll see what happens, and I think Dubas has kind of proved that he's working around cap situations, and I still think that Kessel 1.2 is bugging me, but I think the Leafs will work around it and still got Marner, Kapanen, Johnson, and a few other guys to lock up. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please subscribe to the channel, drop a like. Hopefully you enjoy the content here. Again, Matthews with the Leafs. Let's go. All right, Hot Take Hockey. This is John. Peace out.